So, hello everybody. We are Critfail, and we are here today talking with Andrew Gaska about the new Terminator Kickstarter, which will either be upcoming or have just come out based on when this is released.
I'm Andrew Gaska. You guys have had me on a million times already. Writer of the Alien role-playing game, Carbon Gray, a bunch of other stuff, Planet of the Apes novels. I worked on the Terminator role-playing game, and we are doing a major expansion. Oh, Space 1999 as well, which is getting a re-release this year. And we are doing a major expansion for the Terminator role-playing game, which deals with T2 and all the coolness that was in that film and related materials. So the first book that we did for the Terminator was the licensing deal was that we had to deal with the first movie and ancillary materials from the first movie. And I think when I spoke to you guys about this last time, I said I didn't want to separate it from the rest of the stuff so much as contradict what we were going to do later, because even if we didn't do T2 and T1 they're too intertwined so it became a challenge to not mention certain things while giving people something to work with so they understood that that thing was there, even though I couldn't say what it was. So that stuff all gets plugged in with the T2 book. So
nice.
So something we noticed, because Emily and I think Chris had not watched much, if any, Terminator. So we actually started hitting all the movies to get the setting info down. And something I noticed at the start we've watched 4 of them, and I think all 4 have different release companies. Is that making the Terminator license quite complex compared to others where it's like the creator and the distribution sort of network?
That's why we have to stick with the license on a specific segment of it, because not everything is owned by the same people. Basically, when the film came out, I think Canon was the film company, right? That did the first one, right? And when they fell apart, different people at Canon took different parts of the license. Cameron owns part of it, and these other companies. So T1, 2, and 3's licensing rights are all at Studio Canal right now. I think the 4th one might be there too, but the 5th one and the 6th one are not. And Sarah Connor Chronicles is from someone else,
separate entirely.
Yeah. So it becomes an interesting challenge and much harder than Alien was, because I could just grab everything Alien and Prometheus and throw it all together and make it all make sense.
Did that affect the prep? And then you have the comics as well, which is part of it.
Right. So yeah, so for T1, the comics were part of that license that we had. So I could mine those for ideas. And part of the problems is that a lot of those Terminator comics, the T1 comics, came out before T2 did. So there's some major contradictions and things going on. But that's the nature of time travel and going back to fix things and messing them up worse and all that. So.
Absolutely. One thing we also noticed is, so obviously Terminator, we've got some timeline nonsense going on there, and that is similar in a way to Carbon Gray. Is that a theme you enjoy writing about, or is it just kind of come about by happenstance?
I would say I do definitely enjoy it, but it's not like that's what gravitated me towards Carbon Gray. Honestly, the beautiful art is what I saw in Carbon Gray, and I was like, oh, can we do something with this? And then I got into the story. But I mean, time travel, it's one of those things that ultimately I think doesn't work, but you can trick yourself into making it work. So I mean, I don't know.
You think too hard about it.
Planet of the Apes is another thing that I'm well known for, and that is heavy on the time travel as well. The whole thing of that they say in the 3rd and 5th movies is that time is a highway with an infinite number of lanes. Change your lane, you change your destiny. So you do one slight thing different, and everything is going to change. So the approach I wanted to take for Terminator, though, was slightly different than that. Was that time is sort of self-correcting. So if you go back in time and do a major change, go back in time and kill Hitler in the crib. Okay, that's the old thing that everybody always uses. You do that. You come forward in time, and they say, "Why didn't you kill Bob like we told you to?" Because now Bob has
Himmler might have stepped up.
Okay, but if you go back in time and you push Hitler's crib slightly open, closer to the window, and open the window, Hitler may get pneumonia as a child and never rise to power because of that. See, so that was a subtle change that you did, and that has a better chance of actually affecting the timeline than the drastic thing you did. So basically, it makes it the resistance members going back in time to try to stop Skynet from taking over have to just do these tiny little pushes. Otherwise, it's just gonna Judgment Day gets pushed back a week, gets put to like 3 years, gets pushed forward 10 years, all because of the things you do, but just still a Judgment Day. So the trick is, how can we put enough tiny little pushes all over the place to finally make it not happen? That was the best way I could come up with to make it interesting for you going back in time and having to deal with this, because it's like, you could go back in time and destroy the guy who was the lead scientist, Miles Dyson. All right, so so you go back in time and kill Miles Dyson, but does that mean that one of the other guys who was working under him knows enough about what he was working on that he could become the lead scientist now, and maybe it pushes Judgment Day back a little bit, but not all that much. What else has happened that could still lead to that? What little push does somebody get? Someone's always frustrated by this guy's career and feels like he could never amount to anything because this guy is always better than him. That guy doesn't exist anymore. Do you suddenly have the confidence to become the guy who's going to run this program? It gets really complicated, and it can be a lot of fun.
Because that's what happened to John in a way. Because John, especially in Elements of 4, was like, I'm not seeing this person that my mother and everyone else is telling me I'm going to be. Am I only becoming that because everybody tells me I'm becoming that, or am I really that? Now, although on the timey-wimey stuff, when we watched the 4th one, which was a prequel, I started to wonder, did Skynet get the idea to send the Terminator back in time to try to kill John Connor? Did he get the idea from John Connor and Reese themselves? Because there's a conversation he has in there with Marcus, who is a Terminator, and Skynet was still connected to him, and that conversation is from John telling him that Skynet sort of does this. Did Skynet get the idea? Was it a bootstrap theory thing that it didn't realize it could do that till it was told that you've already done it? And then it went, like,
that's an idea.
Speaking of bootstrap, you made me remember we did this. There's this, my writing partner, E.L. Thomas, worked on Carbon Gray with me, worked on Choose Your Own Adventure with me. We were the entire lore team for the T2 project. And one of the things that we came up with was there's this giant section on different type of time loops, and a bootstrap is one of them, and it's becoming your own grandfather is one of them, and all these different things that the GM can do to totally mess with the players when they're trying to accomplish something back in time. So
that's a very Back to the Future feel. Becoming your own grandfather.
Yeah, well, that's in Futurama. That pretty much almost happened with Fry, I think.
Yeah.
So,
does that make Terminator then a conventional war or a time war, or both? Was the conventional war to support the time war, or was the time war to stop the conventional war?
I mean, yes. That's what it comes down to. It's however your table wants to present it, I guess, is what it comes down to. All these elements are there, and that's something I tried to do with Alien, and I've done here with Terminator, is give you as much as I possibly can for you to take and say, okay, that rumor becomes true, this rumor not so much. I can take it in this direction because I like that better than this. But presented in a canon framework So
Right.
these things really are here, but here's the stuff where it's kind of a gray area. Then you can, if you want to stay within canon, don't kill John Connor, pretty much. But
Right.
other than that,
We'll do our best.
and then something that was also that comes into a bigger play here in the T2 book was something I introduced in the T1 book, was the idea that there's a future Skynet Skynet 2.0, who is somewhat wiser than its younger self. So it's sending agents back in time to try and tell its younger self, don't make that mistake, do this. And its younger self is like, who the hell are you? Clearly you failed, otherwise you wouldn't be here to warn me. So you didn't know what you're doing. I know what I'm doing.
Right.
So it becomes an even bigger mess.
Bigger mess, yeah, but if I know what I'm doing, then you wouldn't have failed in the future because I would have succeeded now. So then, yeah.
Right. So another interesting thing that this opens up is the idea that a group of Terminators sent back, and I don't mean far in time, even just, within the Future Wars time period, 10 years back into the 2020s instead of the 2030s. What do you call it? A team of Terminators could actually ally with resistance members because they need to take something out on Skynet's younger self in order to do the changes that they need to do. So you can wind up being temporary allies with Terminators, not realizing necessarily that this is going to make things worse if this actually happens. So, it opened up a lot of doors and a lot of different ways to look at things. So
interesting.
So hence the infiltrators would have a dual role then, wouldn't they?
How do you
so they primarily could infiltrate to actually more than a dual role. Information gather, to adjust the timeline as to what Skynet wants, or to go in and assassinate. Multitude of tasks they could end up doing.
They're infiltrating themselves now as well.
Or infiltrating themselves. Yep.
There's something that Cameron has said several times, which I also introduced an element of into there, is that Skynet feels bad for killing humanity.
Okay.
So he said that a lot of what Skynet is doing is self-sabotage because it feels guilty for what it did and felt it could have handled things differently. And that's what gave me the idea of Skynet 2.0.
Okay.
Maybe Skynet 2.0 wants to explore the idea of having humans and machines coexisting.
Okay.
But maybe Skynet 2.0 feels that in order for that to happen, we have to beat them into submission, and then we can give them some rights. That type of thing. Maybe it's not necessary. Let's shake hands and have a nice lunch together. But it's. I read that in an interview with that Cameron had done, and I was just like, that's really interesting.
It is. We were actually talking about that yesterday, about whether Skynet had morality, and apparently they do feel bad. But so original Skynet, not 2.0.
Yeah.
If they succeeded and wiped out all the humans, what do you think they'd do then? Because I've always wondered that. Do they just power down? They're like, mission accomplished? Do they set their sights on the stars and find other people to kill? Or
so the reason why Skynet did what it did was because it wanted to protect the world. Yes. So it had to protect the world from humanity. So I guess the world's protected if it
destroys humanity, so it can retire.
And that's something that some of the comics played with, this idea of there being towns set up by Skynet that just had Terminators in them. Right. And the Terminators were basically mimicking middle-class life. Like they're going to replace humans and learn to be like humans, but not make the mistakes humans did, so that the world is protected. It's another interesting concept there. Another idea is with Skynet 2.0 is if Skynet 2.0 thinks that humans can be integrated, maybe Skynet 2.0 is putting human brains in Terminator bodies, to try and make an actual cross, an actual cyborg, not a robot that has skin on top of it as a cyborg.
Or like Marcus.
Yes, exactly. So it can go completely in directions that people. I mean, like Terminator is one of those things, just like with Alien. When I and I think I've told you guys this probably because I wound up saying the same things in a lot of interviews. So forgive me if it's a repeat. But I was a franchise consultant at Fox, and they told me, hey, if there's any properties that we have that don't have a publishing thing already lined up, if you can find someone to publish it, we'll recommend that you work on it because we want the canon to be right. Okay. So for 18 months, I shopped around Alien to all the role-playing companies, and every single one of them said, oh, it's a one-note thing. It'll never last. It's just going, oh no, there's an Alien. It's over with. It's going to tank. And they weren't interested. Free League was the only ones who saw the potential of how much more it could be. And Terminator is this, all right, you're going to go back in time and stop Skynet from killing John Connor or his mother or his grandmother or his uncle, or or are you a Terminator going back in time to stop someone else from destroying Skynet? It just seems like if you're going to follow the movies, this is the same thing over and over and over again. So, but the universe really suggests all this other crazy, wacky stuff, and I've tried to emphasize it in these books so that you can really get a lot out of a campaign.
Well, that's like in the first two movies, we mostly see similar places, basically a shattered, war-torn area. But will the RPG start to expand locations, and do we see what's going on in the rest of the world? Because by 4, they have airfields with A-10 Thunderbolts and helicopters and stuff that are out in the open, where Skynet is obviously not just being able to nuke them from orbit sort of thing. They're a level of safety, various degrees must be, but they're obviously feeling calm enough to have the A-10s out in the open rather than underground bunkers sort of thing. Are we going to see more of the locations sort of thing?
Well, I mean, we definitely have gone in depth into locations in the future in the new T2 book. One of the things that I really wanted to explore with this also was the human factor, because forget about the machines for a second, okay? We're in a post-apocalyptic world. There's going to be warlords. There's going to be somebody who had stuff and the force to basically take what they want, who've created a town that's, maybe it's underground or maybe it's in a junk pile and hidden somehow or something, and this community answers to them, and there's some warlord who's running this, and they're going to go out and raid other human settlements, and because this is what people do. So the threat is not just the Terminators in this future, it's that as well. So this we detail several resistance bases that are hidden across the United States. We've only briefly touched on Europe because at least I feel like that's a topic for a whole other campaign book.
Right.
And it's more important to get T1 and T2 established first. So basically people are jerks. And one of the things that we established in the first game book is the main cool thing you can be that's new in the core book, okay, is agents of John Connor. And what these people are, they travel the wastelands and they're trying to find these warlords and these other people and say, hey, instead of being a dick, how about you work with us and we build a stronger thing so we can stand up against the machines, trying to build a network, okay? Trying to make the resistance stronger, if you find this, you find this one town that has no medical supplies, but has grown mushrooms in caves. So you take the food from them and you give the medical supplies to someone else. And so now we're making all humanity. But of course, there's warlords who are like, no, I'll just take what I want. So it's always a problem. So it's much more than just a wreck land, because one of the things that's going on, we have, oh my gosh, But basically, they work in these caves growing mushrooms for everybody. We definitely have rat farmers as well. All right, so we have mushroom farmers, and I can't remember what they're called exactly. But we've got rat farmers who are raising rats for meat, and
Right.
these sound like terror, like really weird things. But what are you going to do if you gotta keep people alive, right? So we tried to build what life is really like in that future. All these different cogs that are important. So yeah, the agents are mentioned in the first book, and that's the new cool thing you can be. Now there's all this expansion in the T2 book about what is this community doing? What is there's a shopping mall in the Midwest that was huge, and that's become a resistance base. It's an underground shopping mall that's been buried. But it wasn't a resistance base. It was like the security guard who had the keys to the thing basically brought his friends in to survive the apocalypse, and then eventually they started letting others in who could help them, and built a community out of that. So the warlord is actually a former mall security guard. It's like these things could actually happen. It just gives somebody who has something the others don't, that would be the key to survival, and then that person, if they get the right people to protect them, could be the ones who are in charge. The new character class that's the awesome thing in the T2 book is the TDC, which are the Temporal Displacement Commandos. And we started mentioning these guys in the online releases. We're doing online adventures that are being released every few months. That basically together tell a bigger campaign. They've been on Drive-Through RPG. I think there's two or three of them out at this point. If you want to check them out. But these Temporal Displacement Commandos who are sent back in time to accomplish certain things, but are also given certain things which will allow them, if they can make it happen, to come back to their own time period. So it's basically a pairing of radioactive isotopes, and this isotope is in they're quantum entangled, which means if you have two atoms that are quantum entangled, means you could and put them on the opposite sides of the universe, you could step into one and come out the other. So if you have this isotope and you build the proper machine in the past and find a way to power it with what it needs, which is a crazy amount of power, you'll be able to get back. So some of them have the isotope in a capsule that they swallow before they go back in time. Others have it injected into a tattoo, which could cause problems later on because you might get cancer. But it gives them a way to not just be stuck in that past. So you'll see, if you're playing one of those campaigns, you will encounter resistance guys that have been there for 50 years because they were sent out before this thing was a thing. But your characters don't necessarily have to go back in time and be stuck there. And that's one of the things that this campaign that we're been releasing monthly, not monthly, but every few months adventures on is showing. It's what actually you would have to do to actually make you go there, accomplish your goal, and then manage to get back out. The power required for this thing is the biggest problem. So with the isotope and a right power source, as long as you have the plans, and that's another thing, somebody has the plans tattooed on their back of how to make this thing. So if someone gets stretch marks, then now you got to figure out what the hell.
Get injured if you want, but not on the tattoo. We need to be able to read that.
Yes, I mean, maybe I sound like a crazy person because I'm just like spouting all these ideas, but I mean, I am a crazy person. And but these things are all in these books. I'm very proud of what E.L. Thomas and I were able to accomplish with this, with taking the lore and taking existing lore and expanding on why didn't they ever do this? Why didn't they ever do this? But keeping it true to Terminator in the process. So.
Right.
It's a shame that the movies always seem to go back to the same core concept, because there is so much more. And Terminator 4 is the one that didn't. It didn't have the time travel. But I feel like they got a lot of things wrong in that movie. It's every time we had seen the future in flashback before then, it was always dark skies. Okay.
Yeah.
It was always that deep blue. And obviously that was probably supposed to be night. But in my head as a kid, there must be ash in the sky.
Right.
We must never get a full sunrise, And then in Terminator 4, we see everything's bright and sunny and everything. And I was like, it doesn't have that mood. It doesn't feel the same way. So like at high noon, you got a twilight. Is one of the things we're describing here. Okay, so that's the brightest that you're getting.
Right.
So the world is pretty fucked. And I think the airfields and stuff like that, like we have stuff like that we put in here, but it's hidden and it's explained how it's hidden. I feel like it was a little. I remember sitting in the theater for T4, and I was like, well, wait, why wouldn't Skynet just see that from a satellite?
Yeah,
everything's just out in the open. Yeah,
right. So that's why I was assuming there had to be a reason it didn't. And because that's the thing, they were in the open, they weren't in hardened bunkers or anything. So, and they did say, but they never explained why, when the people were being stolen, that they went, no, they've never come this far south before.
Right.
Or maybe not south, but so they never come this far before.
Yeah.
So there was obviously a boundary that they've written that Skynet wasn't crossing or was having difficulty crossing, but they didn't explain why that was. It wasn't.
They even talk about how so and so was deep in Terminator territory. So like so they had you're right.
Border.
They had a part of the map and we're spreading from there, definitely. But that okay, let's see if we can make that make sense. So they nuked the whole planet.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
Okay, all right. So no, this is how
I can see it
sense.
making sense. I can. If they've got the physical stuff all here, they need time to expand out.
Yeah, but the thing is though, they definitely would have satellites. There's no question that Skynet would have satellites. So Skynet can see anything unless you have some kind of active camouflage that can take care of it. There's in addition to that, I mean, why not do a flyby of hunter killers if you want to take something out? Are there any nuclear missiles left that oh, hey, look, there's a base over there. They're not even hiding themselves. Well, hey, get one of the ICBMs out of storage. Let's get it up. So it's the world is not presented in that film as bad as I think it should have been.
Right.
But that movie's not even covered in what we've done so far. And you can just, if you want to look at the universe in a broader sense, sometime change caused the world to be more like that in that particular
timeline.
Yeah. So what that allows you to do is you can look, because of this whole lane thing, you could still stick to canon and have John Connor get killed and your character becomes the new leader of the resistance, because it just means it just happened in this timeline. And then there could be somebody who goes back in time and corrects that, and then you were not the leader.
Right.
It's the question is, do these timelines continue to exist as separate branches, or do they rewrite themselves? Physics would suggest that it would coexist as different branches.
Right.
But both are cool ideas, and we present stuff that allows you to play with that in both ways. I think I mentioned last time about the first book that I introduced this thing that if you die, you roll on a chart and an alternate you might be on the same mission. So it also allows it to not get boring. because even if you're playing the same character and you died and you're picking up the same character, that character's statistics have changed now. And so now, maybe you were the wheelman before, and now you're the sniper. It's what are you best at? There's lots of cool things that can be done with time travel, and Terminator. The whole key to Terminator is that, as clear, look, they destroyed Cyberdyne in T2.
Yep.
They got rid of all the chips. Didn't end it though.
Right.
Because it's too drastic what they did. It was just too drastic. It could be that what they did was so drastic, right? That in the newspapers, Cyberdyne facility was destroyed, blah, 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 blah. Skynet in the future sends somebody back in time to make sure that there's a backup of the plans taken out of there before Dyson destroys them all. You know what I'm saying? You're going through the records, you're like, oh, hey, that's going to happen. I should do something about that. If there's a persistence of self after the timeline has changed, then that would give someone a chance to go change what's being changed. So persistence of self is another thing that we cover in the game. Again, I feel like I sound like a crazy person, but do you guys know what I mean? Is it clear what I mean by persistence of self? The timeline changes, but you remember things, and you remember, wait a minute, I remember I did that. I sent someone back to do that other thing. Or maybe you remember that you were sent back. Another thing is that if you were sent back from the future, and I think you see some of this in the Sarah Connor Chronicles as well, which I love that show, but it's not covered by this stuff because it's a different license. But if I've accomplished something when I'm back from the future, I'm from the future, I've gone into the past, I do something which changes the future. But if I wasn't that person from that other timeline that came back into the past and did that thing, then it wouldn't have changed. So in other words, my persistent self has to stay in order for that to have happened. So now when somebody else comes back from the future, they're talking about dates that are different than the dates you know. And in the show, one of the characters was trying to explain to the other one that they were tortured, and the guy has no memory of being tortured because his other self was tortured. And it's just it becomes layer upon layer and allows the GM lots of opportunities to fuck with the players in an entertaining way for everybody.
So from the Kickstarter point of view,
yes.
What are people going to get with the T2 source book? Because it's a source book, right?
Yes, it's a source book. It's a source book for the Terminator 1 game. I don't know. Like last time we had the standard cover, the Kickstarter cover, and the leather limited cover. Okay, I don't know.
I've only seen the other two. Yeah, I've seen the limited and I haven't seen the Kickstarter one.
No, the Kickstarter one is the one with the Terminator on fire.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. I ordered the white core book, the white leather core book. That's the one that I've got coming.
This was the Kickstarter exclusive one.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Nice.
So this was my favorite cover of them.
That's very cool.
So it has new character kits, which the time displacement commandos is the major one. It has a very large game master section on time travel and factions in the future. It also has a nice big, like the core book has a huge section on the 80s and talks about the 80s slang and stuff like that.
Yeah,
we did that for the 90s in this one. That was a lot of fun. Yeah, do you guys remember slap bracelets?
Yes.
Yeah. I think one of our chapters has slap bracelets in the title.
Those are super popular when I was in school.
A lot of new Terminators.
Right.
So it's funny because some of them have been around since we did the first book, because when Mark Rapson from Nightfall and we were sitting there, we're going through the comics and we were going through things. I was like, oh yeah, Mike, you do that Terminator. And I'd be like, okay, and I wrote that up, and then at the end we're like, we have too many Terminators. So it's like, what are we going to do? You just pull some of them, put them into T2 book. So yeah, I mean that seems to happen with most of the books I work on. I write too much, and they take some of it and throw it in the next book, and then I write too much.
To have extra.
There always has to be a next book. It's a good way to keep yourself employed. But yeah. So new Terminators, information on Skynet 2.0. There's the coolest thing, probably, and it's got to be that now you can play Terminators.
Okay.
So there's rules to play a resistance modified Terminator, so that you aren't on the good guy side now. There's also guidelines. We didn't want to go too dark. So we went dark, but we didn't go too dark. And for me to say I don't want to go too dark, that means that that would have been really bad, because I mean, if anyone's read what I write in Alien, so there's guidelines for playing Terminators under Skynet's command and stuff like that. But the interesting thing about the T1000, okay, which is also obviously in here, the T1000 was a prototype in
yes.
Okay, and the reason there are not mass-produced T1000s is because they don't have a chip that can be flipped into read-write mode or read-only mode like Arnold does. Okay, now I don't know, when you guys watched T2, did you watch the extended version or the original theater version?
I think it was the original.
Okay, so in the extended version, after they first escaped from the mental hospital, they're in that garage for the night, and they're pulling the bullets out of Arnold's back, and he explains that they have a chip that's put into read-only mode when they're away, and John gets the idea, well, can we flip the switch? And they cut open his head, they pull the chip out, they flip the switch, and they put it back in. And that's why Arnold later in the movie is smiling and doing all these other things
more, because
he's now in learning mode. Okay. And so that's read-write mode as opposed to read-only mode. Okay.
Right.
So all the other Terminators, like Skynet, if a Terminator's in read-write mode and decides he's going to be, you know what, fuck Skynet, I'm going to do my own thing. As soon as he comes within range of a Skynet server, Skynet can flip his switch back.
Yeah.
Okay. So when a Terminator is wiped and reprogrammed by the Resistance, they have to write software in there which will keep that from the remote Skynet connection from being able to take that over. But there's still always a chance it could be. So if you're playing a Terminator character, something goes wrong, you take damage, you're also okay. Now you're a Skynet machine again, and you could go on a killing spree. So you got to be careful there. But with the T1000, the T1000 is a liquid computer. Each one of the T1000's quote cells is a duplicate of the other one. So you would need like millions of off switches if you're going to switch them into read mode only. But since it's liquid, you really can't even do that. So the T1000 is very independent, and they're always in learning mode, and they could potentially be a problem for Skynet if a T1000 or multiple T1000s were like, why are we taking orders from you again?
Say, that's a nice bike. I actually think I'd like rolling around Nevada instead of nuking the world.
So, and I think that that was something that they were getting ready to play with the Sarah Connor Chronicles too, because the T1000 that was creating a different computer. If you guys saw the series in the second season, they were creating a different computer that was like Skynet in the past to create a rival for Skynet in the future. and it was the T-1000 that was doing this. So it's there's so much cool stuff you could do with this world that wasn't done in the films, because everybody, and I don't know if it's the writers or if it's probably Hollywood itself, because it's always like, oh no, you can't do a Terminator film without time travel. Look what happened the time they tried to do that with the fourth movie. Didn't do as well. You got to do the same thing again. You got to restart again. Got to restart it again. It's the same thing with origin films for superheroes. I'm so glad that in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we did not get an origin Spider-Man movie. They're like, yeah, you know who this guy is already. Because we need a fifth origin movie for Spider-Man. So yeah, it's they want to recapture that feeling, but what I think a lot of times Hollywood forgets is that feeling that you're recapturing was of something new. So it's like, we had not seen anything like Terminator before. Okay. So and in T2, we wouldn't have thought of Arnold being the good guy. She did. Really?
It went Terminator 2, Judgment Day. She said Arnold's going to be the good guy.
No, it wasn't right then. It was when they both appeared. I said it's going to be the opposite
5 minutes.
Time.
That's 5 minutes into the film.
Opposite time, he's going to be good, and the other guy's the bad one. And then
that's 5 minutes into the film.
We were watching it with Chris as well, and he went, "Why would they do that?"
And he did.
Because we already had him be the bad guy. They're going to do something different this time, or it would just be the same as the other one.
Yep. No word of a lie. 5 minutes in, she's like, "Arnold's the good guy."
Well done. So
they get sick of watching stuff with me.
Yes.
If you watch the movie though, they try to make you feel like Arnold's going to be a bad guy again when he's walking down the corridor with the roses and pulls the rifle out, and it's like, and that's what Cameron wanted the audience to think, and he wanted them to be surprised in the theater. But Hollywood was like, no, we got to sell this as Arnold's the good guy. We'll get more people in the seats. And so when the ad campaign started coming out, making it clear that Arnold was the good guy back then in the 90s, Cameron was pissed. It's like you guys just blew the big surprise for the film. But at the end of the day, why is a movie being made? To get more people in those seats.
Right. All right.
So what are you going to do? It's tough. It's tough to have a surprise. So
I think Perry we discussed before, right? Was like that. It would have been a good surprise to. Oh, okay. No spoilers,
really
but
keep it a surprise until the first round of people have seen it, because you can't make everyone who's seen it keep.
Well, they
the
kept Darth Vader a surprise, didn't they?
Nowadays with the internet, that wouldn't work.
There was no social media back then. Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
Standing in line.
Yeah, that was always the jerk who's gets out of the
comes out of the movie and says,
Yeah.
"Hey,
I remember
Luke's dad."
every time I saw a movie in the 90s and I left the theater and there was a line of people waiting to get in, I would always be like, I can't believe they all died. And
Every single one of them.
let them think I'm some asshole. They were right.
But it was Bambi.
Can't believe they all died.
Oh.
So you gotta bring that new element that makes people say, oh, I didn't think you'd do that with this thing, instead of just trying to do the same thing again, and the beats are the same exact thing on the film, and it's like, well, we got to make everybody think he's dead, but then he's back, as the robot mode now. It's like, no, stop doing the same thing over and over. So yeah, to go back to something you were saying in the beginning, it's a very strange license because it's so broken up over so many different things, and all these different companies want to try and make the new definitive Terminator. But I think the only definitive we've ever had was 1 and 2.
Right.
And I remember seeing 3 in the theaters in the 90s. And I was kind of just a little disappointed with it, but I also enjoyed it,
Right.
But the TX, the female Terminator, there was nothing new about her really.
Yeah.
Now she was a robot, but had some parts that were a T-1000.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
You know, it's the T-1000 was such a radically different idea that I think, yeah, you plateaued there. You're not gonna come up with a cooler thing than that, you know. So there has to be something else in the story. If it's not going to be the machine you're facing, there has to be something else there that is, wow, I never thought you would have done that with that. And I think the Sarah Connor Chronicles did that a lot. I think they handled things really well with Cameron. The Terminator was in Cameron. I don't know if you guys watched that, or am I been just spouting craziness again?
I haven't yet, but that's Summer Glau, right?
Yeah,
That's what I thought. Yeah, I want to watch it. I like her.
It's definitely worth it. It's funny though, like the second half of the second season. Well, actually, probably the last 4 episodes of the second season. You suddenly can tell that they were like, shit, we're going to be canceled. We need to go off the rails to keep people wanting to, you know. So they started doing crazy stuff, and it's like, all right, guys, calm down.
We got to get people invested. We got to make them wonder what's coming next.
And the last episode ends on a cliffhanger, which we will never have solved. So,
of course.
But up until then, the show, it made sense. It was going somewhere. Then it was like, oh my God, here's the panic episode. You can see the panic. Yeah, panic didn't pay off.
They tried.
So is there any theme of crushing things? Because I mean, the very first time we see the skulls getting crushed, and it's very much machines crushing humanity. Then we have the hydraulic press. We have the machine standing on one of the other skulls. I think at the start of T2, you've got a skull, and then the Terminator stands on it. Arnold crushes his really sexy star sunglasses. He's crushing the roses. There's a lot and then in 4, the helicopter crushes a Terminator coming full circle when it's on the ground. Is there a theme to the crushing?
No, but now I wish I wrote an adventure where you get rid of the Terminator in one of those car compactor things.
Oh,
yeah.
A little cube at the end.
Yeah, the little eyes looking out, still glowing red.
It definitely.
Is it in read write mode now?
Oh no!
See, the thing is, so with game design, right? And this is something that I think fledgling GMs make mistakes like this. Okay, it's like, I'm going to build an adventure that ends with them killing the guy in that thing. Okay, no, you just made a railroad thing where your players don't have any say in it. All you can do is make it so that somehow they wind up in a junkyard that happens to have that thing there, and happens to have one of those magnet things that they can maybe use that to grab the guy, or happens to have this other thing. And there has to be 15 different ways you can kill that Terminator hidden in that junkyard. And if your players come up with the 16th way, if it's crazy and awesome and really creative, let it work.
Yep. Yep. Kieran once said, you can lead a donkey to water, but then hope it doesn't become an ass.
Okay. I got nothing for that.
I hope it doesn't become a player that then does what you don't want it to. I don't know.
Yeah, so that's what he was actually referring to players. He said, like, when you the GM, do everything you can to help them, and they will go out of the way to sort of kill themselves.
Well, what else are we supposed to do, really?
Well, I mean, you know, and that's why I've included the thing where death could be the beginning.
Yeah.
In this, I'm also part of the writing team on a project that's on BackerKit right now called the Black Ballad, and the whole idea, it's a D&D 5th edition compatible, and the whole concept of that is when you have a total party kill, you pick up this book, and this is what happens to your party when they're dead. So you know, it's the end does not have to be the ending in any of these things.